Hello and welcome back to Excellence Noura. Today we are talking about Fannie Barrier Williams. She was a prominent and respected leader. She dedicated her life's work to advancing opportunities for Black women. Fannie was born in Brockport, New York, a small town near Rochester, on February 12, 1855. She was one of 3 children born to Anthony J. Barrier, a native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Harriet Barrier of Sherborne, New York. Fannie's family was for many years the only Black family in the town. Her father was a barber and coal merchant. He was an active and well-respected leader in the community and in the local Baptist church. She graduated from the State Normal School in Brockport, which is now the State University of New York College at Brockport, in 1870. Fannie was sheltered from racism and felt that she was equal to whites. After graduating from the State Normal School, Fannie traveled south to teach free Black Southerners. Being in the South led her to the realization of how ignorant she was towards racism and discrimination. She commented in a Northern Negro's biography, which was published in the Independent, "I have never quite recovered from the shock and pain of my first bitter realization that to be a colored woman is to be discredited, mistrusted, and often meanly hated." She met S. Lane Williams, a native of Georgia, and he was a graduate of the University of Michigan in 1881. He was a former school teacher and a promising law student who became her husband. Upon completion of his law degree in 1887, Fannie and Lane married and immediately moved to Chicago. There, Lane worked as one of 11 assistant attorneys in Northern Illinois and ultimately served as the assistant district attorney in Chicago. Fannie devoted her efforts to helping her husband establish his law practice. Then slowly she began to establish herself in the Chicago community. She worked to secure recognition for Blacks and sat on the board of control at the World's Columbian Exposition planned for Chicago in 1893, which is also known as the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. I want to talk a little bit about the Chicago World's Fair of 1893 before I go more into Fannie. So the Chicago World's Fair was a World's Fair held in Chicago from May 5th to October 31st of 1893 to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus' arrival in the New World in 1492. Now, Blacks weren't allowed to participate in the official boards of authority at the fair. No Black man was allowed to join the National Board of Commissioners, and no Black women were let into the Lady Board of Managers. While there was no official pavilion or exhibit for Blacks at the fair, Frederick Douglass managed to take over the Haitian Pavilion and turn it into the unofficial center for Black activity and representation. Now, Frederick Douglass's reaction to exclusion from the fair, unlike some of his Black contemporaries, was to push harder for representation and inclusion. He had himself appointed as Haiti's commissioner to the World Fair. He invited important Black individuals to visit and speak, and used the pavilion as a hub to pass out pamphlets protesting Black exclusion and racism. Also at this fair, tribes from Africa were shipped and displayed to give Americans a picture of what these quote-unquote savages lived like. They were also called human zoos, and they would bring in natives from different countries and display them on as a quote-unquote human zoo exhibition. Also at the fair, Nancy Green occupied a booth, and Nancy Green was quote-unquote Aunt Jemima. That was the woman that they hired to represent herself as Aunt Jemima. So she was in a booth there, and she cooked and served pancakes for hundreds of guests each day. And I'm not trying to be funny, but seriously, I hope she wasn't doing it by herself. And you would think that wouldn't be the case, but wow, that's unbelievable. They had her in a role as basically a mammy, and just using her to say, oh, well, I mean, she was paid. That was one thing. She was paid, they said, a lot of money for that time. But my goodness. The fair administrators came up with Colored Day, a day in which all blacks were to receive free admission and in which their contributions to the nation would be celebrated. Upon their free admission, each black visitor unbelievably received a free slice of watermelon. Now tell me what a slap in the face. Blacks were basically excluded from this fair, but on Colored Day you can come, and then we're going to insult you. Because not only are we insulting you by inviting you for one day, and then we're going to give you a stereotypical piece of watermelon to go along with that. Wow. Back to Fanny's story. In 1894, Fanny found herself again in the focus of the spotlight when she was nominated for membership into the elite, exclusively white Chicago Women's Club. For 14 months, the club deliberated in regards to admitting a black woman before offering her admission in 1895. So it took them a year and a half basically to decide. And I wonder if that was because of their own prejudice, or if it was they were afraid of backlash. And it's probably both. So Fanny remained the only black woman in the club for 30 years. Fanny didn't have children, so she devoted herself particularly to causes within the Chicago community. In 1891, she founded Providence Hospital and its training school of nurses. And in 1905, she further aided in the establishment of the Frederick Douglass Center, an interracial settlement project on Chicago's South Side. After her husband's death in 1921, Fanny's activism slowed down. So in 1924, she became not only the first black woman, but also the first woman to serve on the Library Board of Chicago, a position she held until 1926. At the end of her term, she returned to her family home in Brockport to live with her sister. In 1944, at the age of 89, she died of arteriosclerosis and was buried in the burial family plot at the High Street Cemetery in Brockport. I think about what a black socialite would look like in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Fanny definitely fits that. She was in many ways that socialite, but she definitely was a prominent and well-known socialite of her time, as well as an activist. Well, hats off to Fanny being a part of the Chicago community and making life for black people there better. Kudos to Fanny Berrier Williams. Just a remarkable woman. And thank you so much for watching.